Hey everyone, Vice Versa here. 725 is on the horizon, y'all, and we've got a lot of questions, comments, and misinformation floating around. I wanted to take a little time and clear up some of the fog for everybody. That said, some of the later parts of this video might be of more interest to some than others. Time links are going to be in the description for the breakdown, as always, ladies and gents. Alright, so let's move on. What is going to be the best spec for Tomb? This is one of the biggest questions we've been asked lately. One of the questions we've been hearing a lot is Unholy going to be better than Frost? The real answer right now is that we don't know. Things are pretty deep in flux on the PTR even now, and it's difficult to say where everything is going to land. Blizzard's ostensible stance on the subject is probably play whatever you like best, and in a lot of ways I agree with that. A lot of people, including myself, stayed Unholy even when it was without a doubt the worst DPS spec of all of them. Of course, it was still viable, but it wasn't the best by far. The problem is that in a community perspective, if it's not the best, it's not worth anything. My response to that is that this is a game, and I should be able to have fun playing it. That said, a lot of you out there care about big numbers. That said, with the various nerfs to Frost's major damage sources, breath uptime via the T19 4-piece nerf, the gutting of blast radius, essentially nullifying the effects of triple relics to be the equal of 0 relics post nerf, or pre-nerf, seem to be bringing Frost and Unholy that much closer together. The reductions to Frost in tandem with the various buffs to Unholy's general output seem to be putting Frost and Unholy nearly even. I might even venture to say that Unholy may pull ahead later into this patch as strength levels scale higher, and Darkest Crusade's additional strength becomes more and more relevant to scaling. The new T24 Frost bonuses may help close this gap, offering increases in the duration and power of Pillar of Frost, but I'm unsure how they compare to Unholy's T20 bonuses, especially in the event that we move to Darkest Crusade relics as our best in slot. The short version of that, scaling might make Unholy pull ahead as we gear up past item level 920. Another question we hear a lot is, what talent should we be using in Tomb if we're going Unholy? Some of you may have already made the decision to go Unholy for Tomb, which is great. I love Unholy. If you have, good on you. But you may be left wondering what's going to be good. What talents am I supposed to take? Right now, that's very standard. There are accurate guides out there for Unholy right now that'll help you figure out what to spec in the interim until 725 is live. There's a link on the screen right now to the Unholy Death Knight guide at Wowhead, which I maintain myself. Y'all know I wouldn't steer you wrong. Some talents will be losing effectiveness when not used with specific talent setups, but more on that in a bit. And some notes before we begin here. Pestilent Pustules is likely to be standard for every build going forward, as the additional runes will be very much in demand for the T24 piece bonus, which is generally assumed for any raider. Blighted Rune Weapon is usable if you don't have the 4-piece bonus yet. Sludge Belcher is probably the only viable talent in its row, and always will be unless they completely change it, so I won't be speaking about it specifically ever. The defensive talent row is literally up to your preference, but I don't really recommend Corpse Shield despite the fact that it's crazy strong. The potential DPS loss is really crippling. Ebon Fever will probably still be the best option for tier 1, especially with the advent of Soul of the Deathlord, the new ring, that gives you the Bursting Swords talent in conjunction with Ebon Fever if you use them together. But you can use Bursting Swords with certain builds depending on your preference. So we're gonna take a look at a few builds from very general to kind of niche, so we can see what we're working with here. For the first talent setup, we're going to be using Ebon Fever, Pestilent Pustules, Clawing Shadows, Sludge Belcher, obviously, any talent in the defensive tier, Infected Claws, and Soul Reaper. This is going to be our old general purpose build, running those old talents. You're also going to be running a standard stat line. It's been the way to go throughout 7.2 thus far. This is going to offer you a pretty fair amount of output without having to change or do very much about your gear. It works with a wide variety of trinkets and needs nothing specific other than to reach the regular haste and crit thresholds and stack mastery as high as you can. Moving on, we're going to look at a second talent set. It's going to be very similar to the previous, but we're going to be exchanging Necrosis for Infected Claws here. More of the same. It's going to be our box standard single target build. This build is gonna lose some effectiveness, definitely with the proc rate of Sudden Doom falling, as well as the cost of your basic death coil going up. This results in an overall reduction in the amount of death coils you're able to cast, as well as an increase in the length and breadth of the dry spells that we currently experience when using this talent setup. However, Necrosis is going to retain some level of power when used in tandem with Unholy Frenzy this patch. This makes up for the lost death coils with more free casts. This does lose us some utility in the form of our 30-yard range clawing shadows, but if you like the Necrosis rotation, you'll still be able to use it without much loss in efficacy. Much. Thirdly, we're going to be looking at a Castigator build here. This is where we start to get a little bit niche. The Castigator build will be acceptably strong in a variety of situations, but as a result of the necessity of high crit, you're probably going to want 35% or more to smooth out the build and smooth out a lot of that RNG. You're going to be lacking in mastery to bulk out your damage, I feel. It also suffers from some consistency issues due to the nature of Castigator and crit. But you'll also be having some rune expenditure issues that conflict a little bit with T20's various bonuses. So it may not be as strong as we'd like. We're going to look more into that as we find out more information about 725. The fourth talent setup is going to be one of the most niche. It is a specialized DA setup using Ebon Fever, Pestilent Pustules, Unholy Frenzy, Sludge Belcher, any talent in the defensive tier, Shadow Infusion, and Dark Arbiter. This is going to be probably the most niche build available for 725. The brand new DA build looks to be our strongest potential build in this upcoming patch, with several caveats. It's gonna require some very specific support items to push it to the limits. It's a somewhat complex build to make use of, with a lot of moving parts and a lot of non-standard cooldowns to keep track of that aren't always gonna be the same or line up with other things naturally. This is a high skill cap, high damage build that features some fantastic single target ramping damage, which is excellent for powerful adds such as the thing that should not be. As well as some nice consistent AoE. However, distance from the boss for extended periods of time are going to be a considerable weakness for this build, so pay attention to that, guys. You are going to require some very specific items to make this build viable, and if you're missing any of them, I mean, almost any other build is going to be stronger than this. However, if you can gather the shards of the Triforce, I mean, if you can get the pieces that you need, this build is going to be very powerful in comparison to the others. You'll need one or all of the following. Convergence of Fates. Item level here really doesn't necessarily matter much, but the higher the better for obvious reasons. You want that strength. Fellow Infernal Machine, which is a surprising trinket here. You're going to want one 890 or greater, so you don't want to get a very low item level one if you can avoid it. 880 is about the limit that I recommend to take into Tomb. You definitely want to try and get one over 890 or better. And the last thing you'll need is Technologist shoulder pads, which are the legendary shoulders for Unholy that a lot of people are talking about. They are currently in 7.2, not good at all. They're worthless. The DPS increases you get from them are not very reliable at all. They're not very strong. But the buffs to various things in tandem with buffs to the shoulders themselves are combining to make the shoulders relatively strong, especially in combination with this build because DA ramps up really high. So you'll want that damage, that extra bonus damage from Technologist shoulder pads in order to bolster DA into the levels of strength that we're really wanting to look for here. You're also going to want to hit some Haste breakpoints. Another thing that makes this spec kind of complex is that the interactions between DA and Haste are very interesting in that you want to try and fit as many global cooldowns into the duration of Dark Arbiter as you possibly can. So raising Haste to certain breakpoints allows you to increase your global cooldown such that you can get more global cooldowns inside of a smaller space. So you're going to want to start with a minimum of at least 15% haste. That'll be the standard that we're working with here. That will give you 15 GCDs within your Arbiter's duration, as well as 11 Valkyr strikes. From there, you're going to want to move up to about 20% haste, which adds a GCD within that 20 seconds, putting you at 16, as well as an additional Valkyr Strike, which is another cast on your Dark Arbiter. So you get these power bumps on your Arbiter and these additional chances to empower your Dark Arbiter with more Death Coils. From there, the next breakpoint arrives at 28% haste, so it's going to be a big gap. that you're going to want to try and overcome. If you can't reach that next breakpoint, it's better to sit at 20% haste and bolster your mastery, but you're also going to want to shoot for these higher breakpoints in order to get more attacks on your DA and more GCDs in that space. The next breakpoint after 28% is going to be at 32. It'll add another attack to your DA, not GA, as well as add no GCDs. So this is a weaker breakpoint than the 28% breakpoint, which adds one of each, but is also one that you want to shoot for because it's a DA power increase. So if you can get there naturally, that's great, but you don't want to sacrifice too much mastery to do so. I'd say you want to stay above at least 77 to 80% mastery. If you can reach this haste breakpoint in that space, great. If you can't, I would settle back at 28%. This is the reason that we want Fellow Infernal Machine. It gives you a large amount of haste on a cooldown and is very similar to what DA uses with Convergence of Fates. So you'll be able to line them up very easily and you'll get a large amount of haste during that duration, so you get to meet these breakpoints without having to have this base haste as part of your build. So you can use these, so you can do things like stack mastery, you can reach close to breakpoints, and then you can use Fellow Infernal Machine to push you above the breakpoint during your DA cast. So the final breakpoint, and I would say probably the soft cap, is going to be at about 35% haste. That'll give you 18 GCDs within Dark Arbiter's duration, as well as 15 attacks on your Valkyrie Strike. The next breakpoint is very high. It arrives at about 66%, which is the GCD cap. It gives you 10 additional attacks. It gives you 20 full Valkyrie strikes and approximately 13, an additional 4 GCDs. But before that, it's going to be very difficult to meet any of the breakpoints. They reach in about 42% haste and onward. So this is going to be our soft cap for now. You're not going to want to try and push to too much haste. The next breakpoint that I would say that you can aim for if you have Fellow of the Infernal Machine would probably be the 42% haste breakpoint, allowing you to sit at about 32% base haste for your 17 GCDs and your 14 Valkyrie strikes, and then burst to 42 to 43% haste with the Fellow of the Infernal Machine, giving you an additional set of GCDs and Valkyrie strikes. Last but not least, we're gonna look at a kind of a meme build here. I think it's kind of crazy, but it could do very well depending on the fight type. Have you ever really just wanted to do crazy amounts of damage on a fight like Beast Lord, where there's ads constantly rolling in, you need AoE damage on demand every 15 to 20 seconds? This is the build for you. It has abysmal single target output and is really just not usable in any of those situations. But you might find some use for it based on what I've heard regarding Hard Titan, one of the new bosses in Tomb. It may find some use on AoE cheese fights, but if your build has really high AoE already, I would really suggest something more standard. This build requires Death March, the Death Knight Legendary Helm for Unholy, and almost literally nothing else. Soul of the Death Lord is good. Bracers are also solid if you swap Bursting Swords for Evan Fever in this build, but honestly this is just for fun, so I probably wouldn't recommend it in most situations. Other than that, this has gotten a lot longer than I intended, so I'm going to leave you guys with the music outro. And if you have any questions, you can find me in the Unholy Discord, or just message me via email at viceversa.gmail, or just leave a comment. Like and subscribe below the video, and have a great day, guys.